Good afternoon. This is Quintus Curtius. It's December 16th, 2023. Just thought I'd check in with a brief podcast here. Just some things I've been thinking about recently. It's funny how you often have time to think about little incidents that happened when you were a kid when you get older. And these lessons that may have remained trapped in the mind's subterranean regions suddenly surface here and there in unexpected ways. But anyway, I thought I'd make this podcast about the fix. The fix is in. Sometimes the fix is in. Sometimes the game is rigged. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I mean by that, and how to handle situations like that when you're part of something that is essentially a rigged outcome. What do you do? Do you play ball? Do you not play ball? How do you maintain your dignity? How do you push on through and keep on going and keep the morale up? There are ways. There are ways to do things. So let me start out by just relating a little bit of an anecdote here. And bear with me as I go back far in time to a time when I was, I think, probably about 12 or 13 years old. It would have been in the late 70s. I was born in 68, so this would have been, the late 70s. 1980, somewhere around there. But anyway, this is the story. In those days, it was common for parents to send, during the summers, and I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts, and it was common for parents, even, middle class, lower middle class, to send their kids to summer camps, these YMCA summer camps, to do things, like activities, playing sports, swimming, sailing boats if you're by the ocean. And in those days, it was a really, really good time to be a kid. I think the early 80s was a great time to be a young kid because it was before this era of just, hyper competitive, let's send the kid to computer camp and let's turn the kid into a nerd or whatever. The camps in those days were all like physical activities. They were just sports, games, any sort of game you can imagine, baseball, basketball, soccer, swimming, sailing, archery, riflery. They'd have sleepovers and they'd play games like capture the flag where kids would stay out all night. And just almost in some ways kind of martial training for young men. And it was really good because, the boys and the girls were kept separate, so there wasn't any of that bullshit that you see nowadays. And it was also the era before this just obsession with about liability and, don't touch me. And, if I get a hangnail, I'm going to sue somebody. There was just none of that. And also what was good was the summer camps were affordable. For nowadays, they're just insanely expensive and they pamper these kids. But, they'd just have a bus pick kids up. You'd have to go to a certain spot. You get on a bus, you go to the camp, you spend the day there. The bus drives you back, and you come home. It's a pretty standard routine, and most importantly for young families, for young couples, it was affordable. So I was in this camp. It was basically a YMCA run camp, and what's great is you get a chance to mix with kids of all nationalities and backgrounds and income levels and socioeconomic. And we didn't think anything of it at the time, which is good. You'd have kids from urban areas, semi-rural areas, small towns, all that type of thing. So anyway, that's sort of the background here. But I remember once that there was an event, a competition they had there, and it was called the egg toss. So you may have heard of this, the egg toss. And this is a game, or was a game, where you'd have a line of kids, a line of people, like a row, like two rows of people lined up together, spaced just a few paces apart. And they would toss an egg, a raw egg, in the shell back and forth to each other. And then you'd complete the toss, and then each person would take a step back. And so what you had was two parallel lines of egg tossers getting progressively farther and farther apart. And as you can imagine, the winner would be he who could make the toss from the longest distance, from the furthest distance. So you'd have, and what would happen is, you'd toss the egg. You'd have to catch it in such a way that it absorbed the force of the projectile. And then you'd have to be able to throw it or toss it accurately to your partner so that he could catch it with the same level of dexterity and, care for not smashing the shell. So the two lines would get farther and farther apart, and I was paired up with this this kid, and he was from an urban area. He was a really, really funny guy, and it's funny, after all these years, I still remember the guy's name. His name was Senio. Senio. I have no idea if that was his first name or his last name, because everybody just called him Senio. It was common in those days for kids to be called by their last names as well as their first name, so I can't be sure if it was a first or last name. I think he was a Cape Verdean. I think he was of Cape Verdean ancestry. But he was a dark-skinned kid, very funny kid. Everybody liked him. And, we did the egg toss, and we got, the lines got farther and farther apart. Everybody dropped out. And pretty soon it was only me and Senio and these other competitors. And ultimately, we won. We won the egg toss competition. It was a big deal, at least for a kid. I mean, when you're a 13-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid, it's a big deal. So you're proud of yourself. And this guy Senio I just thought of something else. He was a funny guy. People would call out to him to say, "Hey, Senio," and his response would be, "What-do-yo?" So that's how he would kind of riff off his name, But anyway, we won the egg toss, and so we were very happy. And this camp, I think at the end of the week, or I think at the end of the month, I can't remember if it was every 2 weeks. Maybe it was every 2 weeks. They published like a little newsletter, a 1 or 2 page little broadside to announce, current updates and events for the camp. And they had the egg toss competition on there. And of course, our names were not on it. Me and Senio's names were not on it. They had the name of some of this competitor, who were basically brown nosers and ass kissers. They looked like they were connected with the camp counselors somehow. So we got robbed. We won the event, we won the egg toss, but we didn't get any credit for it. Got no credit for it at all. And, I remember old Senio came up to me. He saw me, he came up to me, and he said exactly, I'll never forget, he said it exactly. He had these thick glasses too. It's a good guy, big kid. And he sees me on one of the fields, and he sees me in the justice. He goes, Yo, George, man, they ripped us off." It's exactly like that. And he's holding the newsletter in his hand, and he's pointing to it, and he's really, really pissed off. And I said to him, "Yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know what to say. We won that thing fair and square, and I don't like it any more than you do." And he was really pissed off. But there's nothing we could do, because when the fix is in, the fix is in, and it's the announcement's already been printed. Looking back now, we probably should have, I don't know, done a freaking protest or something, but whatever. When you're a kid, you don't know any better. So anyway, that incident, the fact that incident has stayed with me for 40 years or however long it's been, says that things like that matter when you're a kid. You think about stuff. Little injustices like that, they're seared in your memory. Let's put it that way. Now we're relating this anecdote in a funny way. It's a funny story, but the point is that I remembered it, and I would not have remembered it if it did not penetrate my consciousness in some significant way. Because kids have an innate sense of justice. Kids know when they're being wronged. They know when the deck is stacked against somebody. They know when the game is rigged, and they know when the fix is in. They know it. They just know it. Whether they can do anything about it is a different story, but they know it. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is sometimes in life, the fix is in. And as you get older, you're going to see, if you haven't already seen, that in many arenas of life, it is really not a level playing field. We like to think it is. We like to say it is. We like to pretend it is, maybe for our own mental equilibrium. But the reality is that it's not. Not everybody is starting from the same starting gate. Some kids, some students, some people, some competitors have advantages. They either have relatives that they don't tell you about, or they have financial resource they don't tell you about, or they have friends that are pulling the strings behind the scenes in their favor, or they have some other advantage. Okay? And very often the fix is in. Very often the fix is in. I remember reading once that one of the ways that the Al Capone gang would rig dog races back in the day when Capone ran Chicago was they would decide which dog they wanted to win, and then they would feed all of the other dogs before the race. So all the other dogs would have sort of heavy stomachs, and the one that they wanted to win would not be given any food. Kind of a cunning little ruse there, but anyway, the incidents like that really strike one as significant in one's life because there are many little injustices that kids notice, and they internalize them. They don't really have the resources or the sophistication to fight back, but they're there, and very often in life you're going to see that the fix is in. Social media is not a fair game. Certain accounts are signal boosted and amplified and favored, and certain accounts are not. Competition for jobs is not a level playing field, is not a fair game. Certain people are given preferences. Certain people are given advantages. Certain people are given deferences, and others are not. As competition for mates or resources or living spaces or anything. There is very rarely you'll find level playing fields. So this being the case, what do you do? What does a prudent, intelligent individual do, considering that these realities exist in the world? Well, what I would argue is you can't spend your life obsessing about this stuff. You can't worry about it. Because if you worry about every single potentially rigged game or fixed outcome, you're never going to do anything. You're going to adopt a defeatist attitude. You're going to adopt the attitude, well, why even bother to make the effort, right? Everything is rigged against me. The game is rigged, so why should I even bother? And this is a loser attitude. This is what a dirtbag, a dork, a dunce will do, is use these things as excuses not to try. You have an obligation as a man to put in your best efforts always, not some of the time, not 80% of the time, not 90% of the time, but always. You always have to give a max effort, because even when the game is rigged and everybody knows it's rigged, people innately have a sense of justice and other people will notice. Sooner or later, the cream will always rise to the top. Sooner or later, it always will, and shit will always sink to the bottom. It may take time. It may take years. It may take generations. It may take decades. In some cases, it even takes centuries. But sooner or later, the good will out, and the bad will be revealed for what it is. So that really, I think, is the ultimate lesson of the egg toss story, is that you have to keep on going. You can't dwell on the injustices of the past. You can't dwell on the hurts of the past. You have to keep going. You have to keep crunching. You have to keep blasting. And you have to acquit yourself favorably in every field of endeavor. Because if you're a rollover artist or a collapser or a quitter or a give-up artist or a chicken shit, people are going to know. They're going to see that. And that you will never escape from. So let this be I think the point of the story, which is even if the game is rigged, you can't worry about that. All you can do is make your best showing. And it may take time. It may take longer in some cases. It may take shorter in other cases. But in time, that which is good, that which has merit, that which is worthy of distinction will be recognized as such. So, you guys take care. I'm Quintus Curtius, and we will talk soon.